Hey Weavers, this is Deborah from yarnnovations.com, and today I want to talk to you about how to change colors when you're twining using the dovetail join method. Now the dovetail join method is like in woodworking, a dovetail join where the pieces kind of stick out and alternate, but for weaving you're sharing a warp strand and you're sending both colors around that same warp strand, which kind of gets that dovetail look. I'm going to start by showing you a couple projects where I did the dovetail join. This first one is kind of a rainbowish blanket. A rug. I'll show you a picture of that. And I did the dovetail join right at these between black and gray and rainbow colors. So the dovetail is right here. I actually cut and changed colors manually between gray and black here and cut and changed colors in the rainbow section here. But between these, I did the dovetail join. I like the dovetail join, especially when I'm going to do a project that has a lot more detail to it, or like several colors in a row. So if you can see here, on most of my dovetail projects I start with one color and do counter twining just to kind of establish a base layer, because it's tricky enough to start twining, let alone worry about changing colors around the nails or pegs. So I always start on both ends with just some basic twining. And then for instance here, I started in this direction, so I didn't have to change right away. So I did green over on this end, and then I let that dangle, did a join, dovetail join here to white, and then switch to green, and then switch to brown, switch to green, and to white, and then turn back around. Okay, I didn't do a dovetail join at the gray, I just manually added the gray for a little bit. Okay, the nice thing about dovetail is that you just leave the color hanging that you're not currently using, and then switch over to the next one with that specific dovetail join. And you can kind of tell that it's a dovetail join because you can see the alternating zigzaggy look right here. That's a classic tale of the dovetail join. So let's take a look at how to do that. Now, if you've watched some of my other videos on twining, you know that there are two ways to twist. And there's two ways to twist still if you're doing the dovetail method. I'm going to show you this process twisting over, and it's the same process twisting under. Okay, now while you weren't looking, I went ahead and twined a couple of rows at the beginning, so I didn't have to worry about color change at the beginning because it gets really fiddly. Alright, so let's say you just start your twining. I want my first color to be blue. I'm just going to twine like normal until I get to the spot where I want to change colors. Now traditionally you send one strand to the back. I will tell you that I like to send both of them around as if I'm at the end of the row. But traditionally they send one around. You go around that one and this one, and then under the next one. And then you can twine back a little bit if you'd like. Alright, now you can see that I pulled and this warp strand kind of got tugged out of the way, so you only work a few stitches and then get your warp strand back in place, and then you can push it back up. So I've made a turn with my first color. You're going to share a warp strand, so you're going to introduce your second color right there. I'm going to fold it in half, or about in half, and send half of it around that shared warp strand. I'm going to twine like normal in the other direction. And if you want, you can stop and turn and add another color here. I'm just going to twine to the end. Alright, you can already kind of see, you tug that back in place, that you've got your dovetail started. It was blue and then yellow. So then blue is here. I'm going to come back. Blue is next on the dovetail join. So let's get our blue back. Send one strand around and around the other end of the blue, and then under to work its way back. Keep that warp strand kind of straight. And if you've tugged it out of place after 3 or 4 stitches, then go ahead and push it back in place. Now I've done one, I only sent one around, so there's that little hole that I was talking about. I don't know if you can see it very well. So I'm going to come back with this one, and I'm going to show you the sending the two around, because that'll get rid of that hole. Normally you send one around and it would come back and go over the other strand and then under the next one, and you'd be ready to twine back. I like to pretend this, I'm going to turn like I would as if this was the end. Send the other one around also, and then I'm going to twine like normal on the way back. And if I pulled the warp strand out of place, I'm going to pull it back, pull these stitches back a little bit, push it back up. Now by sending both strands around, it's extra bulky here, and if you do that every time, it's going to be really bulky. You just need to push extra hard on that section. And you might be thinking, well, that's too bulky. Is it going to lay funny? It doesn't really. I did that here on all these straight sections, and you really can't tell. I washed it, and it lays flat just like everything else. So it really isn't a problem, and it gets rid of a hole that you sometimes can see and sometimes you can't, depending on how tightly that you've pulled. Okay. So now we've got blue. Can't quite see that blue is kind of hiding it there. Blue and then yellow, and then blue and then yellow. So blue is going to be next. I'm going to add some blue strips here. Alright, so I've added some strips so I can keep going here. I'm going to work back. It's time for blue to go. But let's say that I want blue to be longer, or to start curving out. Now if I keep doing blue, yellow, then I'll kind of get a straight line right here. But if I don't want a straight line, I can just keep weaving for a little bit, however far in that I want it to go. If you're doing the traditional turn, you would send one around, go around the warp strand and the other part of the twining strand, and then turn and come back. There we go. I tugged it a little bit too snugly, so the warp strand is out of place. So bring that warp strand back, and then push those back up. And you can see it's a nice tight transition here. All right, let's say it's yellow's turn. And if that's the new place where the color changes, they're going to share that one. I'm going to show you again the double, the way I like to do it to get rid of holes. So imagine I'm going to send both of them around it. So imagine that's the end. Send them both around, and then I'm going to work back. Now let's say you want to close off a section. Like you're done with blue. You want everything to be yellow. Right now, everything is at the same level. I've worked an equal number of rows this way. So if I want, I can work my way back. And once I get to that section that has the dovetail join, I can just keep going. Or if I wanted to add blue here, I could. I'm going to move these tails out of the way. And now I have yellow. And I can just keep doing yellow, and if I want to add blue later on, I can. Push these up. And you may be thinking, what about these? These are going to be extra tails, so for every time you change colors and then kind of weave over top of it or past it, you're going to create tails that you're going to have to weave in. So there are a lot of tails on these projects here that I did have to weave in. I will caution you, there's one area that I don't like to do dovetail, and that's little tiny areas. So this section right here, there's a tiny bit of green just so I can get that bare ear shape in there, and then a tiny bit of green down here, and those are really tricky because I felt like I was changing colors after every 2 or 3 or sometimes even one strand. So it was a little bit harder to change colors here. I would have moved this tree over to get rid of this one, but then I would have had a tiny one right here, so I just left it kind of right there. And one more tip, when you're weaving a complicated design, I recommend finishing your rug in a space that's not part of the technical design. For instance, I won't work exactly to the middle if it's part of this bear, because sometimes I have a hard time gauging how many rows I have left, so I might think, oh, I have 2 rows left, and that'll be nice to finish this rounded out bear head. But if I actually had 4 more rows left, then it elongates the forehead. So I recommend completing a complex design and finishing kind of in a neutral area, because if you ended up putting a whole bunch more rows here, well, that just makes the trees taller and this base taller, and that doesn't really matter. All right, now I'm going to show you the twisting under method of twining. If you get to the end, you're going to start twisting under, and it works very similarly to the twisting over dovetail join. You can send 1 strand around, or you can send 2 around. Let's start by sending 1 around. Okay, so if you send 1 around, you're going to have to go under this other one and the next warp strand, and then under, and then under. Now this leaves kind of a vertical stitch right here, but you need to do that, otherwise you're going to expose a warp strand in there. Which is why when I'm weaving under especially, I like to send both of my strands around. Alright, here we go. I'm just going to join like I normally do, fold it in half, start weaving under. Make sure I didn't pull that warp strand out of place, and push these up. I'm going to come back. Just for a little bit, because it was yellow and then blue's turn, so now it's yellow again. So let's send yellow back. You can send 1 around. And if you do, you have to go under the other one and the next warp strand on the way back. And then you keep going. So you can see these lines right here. And it kind of is going to create a little bit of a hole, which is why I often like to send them both around. So just like you would if this was the end, you would send the second one around, and then just come back, start working back. Now it's blue's turn. I can decide to send them both around if I want, or if I think it's time. If these were even rows, then I could keep going with blue. I don't think these were even rows, so I might do 1 more blue and then come back with the blue. So let's go back and do that. Either send 1 around or both of them around. Remember, when you send both of them around, it makes it extra bulky. Normally there's 2 strands that go around at the end, but there's 2 here and 2 here, so that's 4 strands. So I push extra tight right there. And then if I want to come back and move the blue line further, and I just keep going to as far as I want, or the whole row to close that off if I'd like. So they're going to be really snug to make that hole disappear. So you can twist over or twist under when you're doing the dovetail join method. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.